All right, thank you, everyone. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to come and present to you all today. My name's Darren Mottolini. I'm the Program Director for Spatial WA. I work at an organisation called Landgate. We're the State Land Information Authority for the state of Western Australia, and part of a connected network of land jurisdictions that are all investing in digital twin programs here in Australia. So before I begin, I'd just like to start by acknowledging the lands in which I'm on, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation. I'm sure you're all representing different lands across the globe at the moment, and I just want to pay my respect to elders past and present, and I extend that to all First Nations people that might be on the call with us today. So to give you a current status of what's happening here in Australia, the 2030 data and digital strategy is a strategy invested by federal government here in injecting about $1.2 billion into the economy to look at how we better utilise digital data to support emerging economies, better planning, and delivery of community services, which has in turn raised a lot of interest in terms of what a digital twin is. In different states across Australia, the digital twin programs are starting to emerge. In New South Wales, they've got a program called Live.New South Wales that's injected almost $100 million into the digital twin program there at a state level. In Victoria, another $40 million being invested into what they call Digital Twin Victoria. Queensland, which is hosting the 2032 Olympics, is starting to look at how a digital twin platform can be better utilised to not only just look at the Olympics, but how they better plan and deliver infrastructure services in a state that is quite severely impacted by natural hazards year on year through cyclones and alike. And here, where I am in Western Australia, we've got $140 million to deliver over 10 years a state-based digital twin platform for all government agencies to use. And I'll touch on that in a second. So Spatial WA is made up of two platforms that we're trying to implement here in Western Australia. We're still early in our journey. We haven't delivered the technology, but we're being very much focused on what the outcomes of a digital twin actually means at a state level. So instead of looking at a specific project or a new infrastructure project and what a digital twin means for that, we're looking at a state level to say, okay, how does agencies, government, work with community, work with industry through a digital twin platform to better plan, deliver services, to model what might be the plan for the future before they start investing real dollars into changing the natural environment. We're doing that through two platforms. The first is called our Next Generation Spatial Cadastre, and that's looking at how land and property information elevates from a 2D plane to a 3D, 4D plane. We're not working in a world that isn't lumpy and bumpy. It is lumpy and bumpy, and how property is defined both below, on, or above the ground needs to be modernised. And if we do that well, we can then start looking at the digital twin platform itself. But rather than looking at a digital twin platform that is focused on visualization and that common understanding, how do we put in place a platform that better provides capability across government, that if somebody was to look at running a scenario, doing some computational modelling within the platform, can they use the one platform to do that rather than investing in multiple digital twin platforms across the state? Importantly, though, what we're trying to lead off with is not being focused on what is the technology that's going to drive this. It's actually about the change program. So how do people actually start using digital data smarter in a form that meets their outcomes, rather than using a technology and saying, oh, how do I use the technology to solve my problem? How do I use the digital data better through a platform that actually gives me the insights that I require? So really what we're trying to drive through a Spatial WA program here is a change program that's focused on people's behaviours rather than the technology that's going to underpin that. So importantly, one of the lessons that we've learned seeing digital twin programs across the globe is if they've built a proof of concept, they've proved that it could work, and then they go and seek further investment in terms of keeping that and sustaining that. What we're trying to focus on is not a build it and they will come approach, which typically in the data spaces, you build your data stores, you generate some insights and information that generates some sort of wisdom, and we're all singing happy and we can get on with our day-to-day work. What we've experienced is that type of model doesn't work, and what we're trying to work with is a user-generated model that is defined by outcomes, defined by measures, and that generates the questions that we want to ask of that data. If we're able to achieve the outcome that the user is seeking, that generates value, and that way we can continually reinvest in the technology that underpins all of this. And we're going to do that through 4 use cases. So rather than, like I said, develop the technology and see how it can be applied, we're working very closely across different agencies, government agencies here in Western Australia, to really hone in on what is the main problems that they're facing at the moment, and how would a digital twin solve that? Not so much how would the technology, but how would the outcomes of better utilising data to form insights, solve their current challenges now. So the 4 use cases that we're focused on here is looking at land boundaries and unlocking land potential. So if I was to want to understand, where do I build the next mine? Where's the offshore wind farm? Where's the hydrogen plant going to go? Or where's the next housing estate going to go? What land is best suited to my purpose? Second use case is digital approval workflows. So here in Australia, especially in Western Australia, there's a lot of siloed agencies that work independently, and we want to bring them together through a common digital platform to look at how could digital approval workflows work across all these agencies that are involved by having the one common digital platform to do that. Exposure modelling for emergency management. We get hit by a lot of different types of natural hazards, bushfire, cyclone, flood, earthquake as well. And we want to better use a digital twin, use the digital data that's available to us to better plan before those natural events were to occur, so we know how to better respond to that. And the 4th use case is looking at the major investment in infrastructure that's happening globally and across Australia and here in Western Australia. How do we use the digital twin platform to have the digital tools to allow government to work with industry to better build our infrastructure, but look at that infrastructure across its life cycle, not just the build? So how do we use it for asset management as well? Underneath all this is data governance. Data governance is really what the program is rooted in. And what we're trying to do is take a life cycle approach to data governance, and how do we actually improve the maturity, the capability, the capacity for people to manage the required data to the quality level that can be used within a digital twin? And how do we actually uplift the understanding of value of digital data in that space? What we're trying to do is not without its own challenges. So data quality and assurance, that is a low maturity here in Western Australia. A lot of people do a lot of things with digital data, but it's done individually for projects, and that data is then put in a drawer. How do we improve the capacity and capability and governance of data? Capability and skills speaks to that data question. Systems and technologies, we don't want to be vendor locked in by putting in place a digital twin platform. So how do we make it interoperable? Coordination, integration, how do we coordinate a state-based digital twin, which isn't just focused on a single project, which requires ownership and leadership, but importantly, it's all about change management and communications. So these are some of the challenges that I hope you can understand doing a state-based digital twin here that we're facing within Spatial WA here. And with that, I'd like to say thank you for giving me the opportunity to present to you all today, and happy to participate in the questions later.
So our first question, Darren, is for yourself, are you looking at the coupled data required between models for different sectors? Coupling, of course, to remove siloed modelling.
It's a great question. At this stage, we're not focused on whether we need tight coupling or loose coupling in terms of the data models. It's going to be driven by the users at this point in time. We are looking at semantic referential modelling across different data types that might enable loose coupling to occur. So you've got a source truth of information, and then you can apply your RDF or your semantic model to that, your ontology model to the source data to build your model out of. At this point in time, we're looking to put in place, I guess, a broad range of capability that could allow for that tight or loose coupling at this point in time. But what we do know is that we've got very similar data types being collected multiple times across government without any good governance or standards in place. So whether we can get agencies to change their data to fit a standard, or do we need to have some sort of referential model to look at how similar data types can be brought together under a model and then reused for scenario analytics on top of that, is still a path that we go down. And that's part of the data lifecycle approach of what we're trying to explore with Spatial WA. I hope that answers the question.
Darren, question for yourself, please. It's great to see an outcome-led digital twin. Have you looked at the UN SDG, Sustainability Development Goals, as a measure of progress in achieving statewide change?
Thank you. That's a really good question. I can say I've looked at them, and I've actually discounted them for now. I think they're really good at macro level scale. measurement, especially for governments in terms of how they're achieving, those sustainability goals. But from what we're trying to explore within Spatial WA, we're probably bringing it quite down to a micro level. One of the lessons that we've learned, if you take infrastructure projects, and this is part of the research that's come out of UK as well, is that service strikes, as an example, can cost anywhere between 20 to 30% of a project's infrastructure budget. If we were to able to reduce that even by 1%, 2%, that's millions upon millions of dollars savings in lost time, risk, potentially even loss of life, depending on the service strike that you're getting. So understanding how we're delivering that change is going to be driven through the outcomes of those 4 use cases and what those 4 use cases represent first. Once we deliver on those 4 use cases, it's then we can scale to look at how could this platform be used for other things, and including how the state responds to the sustainable development goals at a state level, and then potentially even a national level, connecting up with our jurisdictional colleagues on the East Coast.
And our final question here, Darren, if yourself, I may, is interested in Landgate aspect, looking at boundaries. Can you expand a bit on how that would work?
Yeah, I suppose, when we think of a digital twin, we don't necessarily think about the land boundary data sets that are required to give you confidence about what land is useful for what activity that you're trying to explore with a digital twin. So Landgate is, as a state's land information authority, we manage the state's cadastre, and that is about property rights and responsibilities and looking, well, it's linked to title, but basically informs a person about this is the boundary of land that you're looking at, and this is what you potentially can and can't do on that land. But what we have explored, that land titling only gives you certain information about what you can and can't do to land. There's another 80 odd data sets that exist across WA government that have some sort of boundary alignment to the cadastre. And that boundary alignment might be abutted against the cadastral boundary, so that the boundary of the land parcel, or it might run through it, but it's usually governed by some sort of offset to the boundary. So what we know is that the Earth is continually moving. The mapping systems that we use to project data to give you a real sense of where that land boundary is in the world constantly changes, and that might be through boundary subdivisions, etc., like that. So the challenge really is that if I was to look at a land parcel and say, okay, I want to build a multi-story apartment complex on that, is that land parcel zoned for that? That's an easy question. But is there environmental considerations? Is that in a floodplain? Is that on some sort of contaminated lands? Is that have some sort of planning regulations? And there's 80 odd data sets that currently exist that gives you that level of insight. But it's all boundary based. So what we're trying to do is saying, okay, if we're going to build this platform that's going to provide insights, how do we get better alignment to all these boundaries rather than having them managed independently in silos, which impacts the end user to say, can I do this project on this land site? So we're trying to use the opportunity that we've got with building a digital twin platform to actually uplift that capability to look at where those benefits are by streamlining that boundary alignment. Sounds really boring, but it's such a fundamental piece when we're looking at a state-based digital twin platform like we are here in WA.